Hey guys, it's Greg. In this video we want to show you our thoughts about Oathsworn Into the Deepwood, the game which is now very hyped. Everyone is talking about it. I think this is one of the hottest titles of the last month or more. So this is a review. We are going to do it spoiler free, so just keep in mind that about some aspects we can talk in general, so we will not spoil anything. What is Oathsworn? It's a campaign game using app, but you also can use just a book if you wish. And the game is split into two phases, let's say. The first phase is a story phase where you're exploring and reading a lot of texts and making tests. And the second part is encounter, where you're fighting bosses. So the game is split into 21 encounters. And each of these encounters is merged with story parts. So 21 bosses is waiting for you to kill them in the game. So if you're interested in the Oathsworn, if you want to know what do we think about this game, just check out this video.
After playing the Mortum, we are convinced it will be long till any game will repeat this level of narration, but Oathsworn proved us wrong. The world here was almost entirely consumed by Deepwood, a living forest full of horrors and beasts almost no one can stand against. Humanity was almost lost when the life-saving discovery was made. Salt was able to withstand the forest, not entirely, but enough to protect the last towns. And in these dark days, a free company was formed, training chosen people, and not only them, because the world here is full of the living humanoid intelligent creatures, to fight against the Deepwood creatures. Recently, it's quite often we compare the plot of the campaign board games to the Witcher saga, and Oathsworn World is so far the closest to it. We have skilled heroes fighting monsters for a fee, and grim medieval world overwhelmed by unexplained events, bringing to earth horrors, forcing living creatures to find shelters. Of course, Witcher is just a good inspiration, and the story in Oathsworn, besides many nods to Sapkowski and other authors, is still original, different and surprising. Many parts of the story here are so well written that you can literally feel like being part of it, and a full voiceover made by James Cosmo fits the whole setting perfectly. Friends you will meet during the journey, obstacles you will encounter, and twists and choices you will face put the Oathsworn story at the very top of campaign games we have on the market. If someone will ask me to sum up the mechanics during the encounter with enemies here, I will say Oathsworn is a mix of Gloomhaven and Kingdom Death, spiced up with some new innovative features and streamlined to make it accessible despite a massive amount of factors to consider when playing. Almost all actions during the encounter with bosses are made here by playing cards unique for each class. Most of the cards have a few options to choose from when played, and after making the action you need to put this card in a proper place around your hero board to mark the cooldown called here battle flow. The main twist here is the fact that cooldown doesn't work automatically. To move cards closer to zero, so you can use them again, you need to use battle flow tokens or play other cards in the right moment, because every card put in the space 3, 2 or 1 pushes all cards present there one step closer to zero. The very beginning with this mechanics is quite paralyzing, but once you get this, the feeling of accomplishment coming from a rightly planned strategy is priceless. In Oathsworn, you are free to fight and pass tests using the cards or dice, or mixing them, but in our opinion, using cards only provides the most strategic and controlled experience. Cards used for attacking and tests are very similar to decks used in Gloomhaven, but here they are divided in 4 separate decks. The closer to the black color you are, the bigger numbers are on the cards, yet still every deck has the same number of blank cards. 2 blanks during the test or attack mean you have missed entirely, whereas criticals allow you to draw more cards. There is more to this mechanic, making it even more fair and interesting, but I let you discover this by yourself. Taking hits is solved here also very smoothly. You simply divide the damage by the value of armor and the result is rounded down, representing the final hit points taken. Sounds like math, but in practice it means if you have at least one more armor point than the damage you are defending against, you take no damage at all, and the rest of the counting is easy thanks to the rounded down solution. Up to this, you have the right positioning towards the enemy, specific keywords, cone and area attack, wave attacks, knockback, obstacles, pushing, throwing and much more. We have reaction cards helping with enemy attacks, unique item skills affecting you, other players and the board, and plenty of other things I don't want to share, afraid I can spoil too much, like allies and how they work. Despite this variety and even more stuff introduced during the campaign, most of the rules and mechanics are easy to comprehend after the first, maybe the first 2 chapters, where each encounter means an entirely different boss with a unique board setup and mechanics. Also, the story part of the game is full of surprises and new mechanics introduced during the play. Without spoiling, I can only say the way you are playing the story is not simply copy-paste and repeating the same pattern every chapter, so you can expect some smaller and bigger twists. I'm amazed how many great references were taken from other board games, video games and even books to make the story part of this game so engaging. This is probably my favorite part. Every single class here is designed so well, from the background through the graphic art to the most important playstyle, that I spent over an hour deciding who I want to have in our initial party. Despite some classic archetypes like tank, witch or ranger, every single class is twisted enough to deliver a breath of fresh air here. For our initial party, we decided to pick up Ursus, warrior bear, hitting hard and tanking if needed, ranger from Adendri, I'm not sure I'm spelling this right, Adendri race growing arrows in her own body, huntress accompanied by 2 giant falcons and grim priest, able to both heal companions and smash enemies with his hammer. There is a lot of fun in every single class, and even if you are not into some archetypes, you will not be bored by any of them. I'm also really into how the development of our party members was solved here. It is complex enough to think about it and discuss it with the rest of the group, but it's not overwhelming and doesn't force you to look for the best builds on the internet. The whole composition of hero development cleverly encourages you to experiment. We have some non-reversible elements like permanent tokens granting you special buffs at the beginning of each chapter, buffs represented by tokens you can use when you find them appropriate. Every few chapters your class will also get access to new ability cards you can freely mix with these previous levels, as long as you will have exactly 7 of them in your hand. Hero development is also represented by the items you will acquire or find during the campaign, some of them common ones, changing from chapter to chapter, or unique ones, as the rewards for killing the bosses. After every encounter, you are forced to lose at least one of the items equipped during this specific encounter, and this is a clever way you are pushed to experiment with different playstyles and approaches with every single encounter, because you need to change your equipment. The whole party also grows and gains from time to time points to unlock traits helping with different parts of the game, from having bigger backpack to extra redraws during tests to boosting your allies. It's not a secret I'm a huge fan of Gloomhaven, but I'm aware of its cons as well, besides the non-engaging story. Sticking to one class until it retires was annoying in the long run. Some scenarios were repetitive and not enough twisted to make each of them unique, not to mention the super long setup. Many years have passed since Gloomhaven premiere, and some things weren't as problematic as now, with so many games on the market. And in those aspects, Oathsworn screams it was made for players to enjoy the game as they want, without limiting them. You can change classes you play and your party composition with every single chapter, and it's relatively easy to do, so you can try every single class during the campaign. There are more examples of how this game flexible is. During the encounters, you can make your turns in any order you want, even skipping the players to make more actions if they agree. Setup is also very quick, and if you use the app, the whole session is very smooth and you can focus on the actual gameplay. Did you fail the encounter? No problem, you can skip it or repeat it. Your group of players is changing during the campaign? No problem with this as well. Players can leave and go back later. Are you tired of saving some campaign games between scenarios? Here it takes no time because a lot of stuff is resetting between chapters, and any other elements that needed to be saved are super easy to manage or set up at the beginning of another chapter. You can easily check on the internet what the board, maps and rest of the components look like, but you don't know what most of the minis representing bosses look like. So know this, many of them are both huge and stunning. Not only the idea, design and creativity behind the bosses are worth prizing, but also the fact how well most of the minis are cast. The quality and richness of components here are so vast that I don't believe developers earned a lot, if anything, during the first campaign, but I really hope this investment will profit for them during the upcoming campaign and future projects. Oathsworn is a massive and complex game, requiring the players to be extra cautious at the beginning to play the game properly. Aware of this, the designers gave us an option to play our heroes as full characters and also as their companions, making the management of party significantly easier without affecting the gameplay that much. Solo gamers can even play the whole campaign using only one hero as the full character and the rest 3 heroes as companions. We decided to take the full road here. Both Greg and I control 2 full characters. Due to this, very first encounter was overwhelming. Tracking the battle flow of each hero when fighting for survival was super rough. But once we got ourselves familiar with all mechanics, the game became easier to track and manage. Creators did everything they could to lower the entry level without sacrificing the strategic side of the game. So keep in mind where the beginning is challenging, later is much easier and smoother. The full chapter could last even 4 to 5 hours, depending on how quick your group can be with decision making. For some, this can be an obstacle, impossible to overcome, but thankfully the designers thought about this too. To soften the time required to play, each chapter is divided into 2 parts. The shorter one with the story, taking around 1 hour to complete, and the encounter with the boss, taking usually 3 and more hours. It's very easy to simply play the story part, save your results and start the next session with an encounter. Honestly, the only con of the game we experienced are small bugs and not enough rules clarification in some moments. The rulebook is written quite well, better than Gloomhaven, for example, but it's almost sure you will find yourself in a situation where you will not entirely be sure if you make specific actions properly. As mentioned before, each encounter is entirely different, offering unique mechanics and challenges. This means each boss has its own boards and decks of cards, often filled with a wall of text. While this amount of text was necessary to make each battle smooth and understandable, sometimes it's not fully possible due to some minor bugs or maybe not enough clarification in some aspects. These problems don't affect the gameplay in general, simply require the players to check BGG forum from time to time or play the game as they believe is right without bothering with following the official rules in 100%. You should also know that probably reprint version will be revised in this aspect. The game dominated our whole collection, and from starting the first chapter, the only co-op game we play is Oathsworn. I do not exaggerate in saying it's the best story-driven campaign experience we ever had. The story, narration, a plot full of suspense is as good as this from Folklore, Mansion of Madness and Mortum. Mechanics, take the best from the board game market and spice it up with some clever ideas. Add to this tense creative encounters, stunning minis and many other aspects to get an incredible game that probably will be at the top of BGG list soon. But what makes it even better are the smaller things like the open approach of the designers or listening to the community and making everything as smooth as possible despite Oathsworn being a massive game, including short setup, convenient storage, a decent app with full thematic voiceover. We can see why we shouldn't score Oathsworn for 10 scratches out of 10 possible, minus half a scratch for minor bugs and sometimes not enough clarification, slowing down some encounters, which should be revised during the reprint crowdfunding campaign starting this October. This also means Oathsworn is getting our highest recognition called Mark of the Beast, reserved for the best games on the market. That's all for today, see you at the next game and don't forget to subscribe our channel.